make the pickle good.
Good
Make it a
pickle.
good pick. I am a pickle connoisseur.
Oh,
Yeah, don't you dare give me a throwaway pickle.
This moment is so fucking good.
And I want it to be pretty. I mean, at that level, I really do think you eat with your eyes before your mouth. I feel like I'm saying that
I
wrong.
think you eat with your nose, then your eyes.
You do a bump, a line, and then you
go
put it in your
in-
ear.
Exactly.
But I lost my point. I went
Ah!
on such a big tangent. Oh, I
How's
want
that
to
coming
see the
treat you?
food. Shut up.
Wait, what was I talking about?
I'm blonde in an aloha
You're
dress
super
with
blonde.
fake sunglasses. I can be
love
ditzy
it.
today.
You look so. This is like Caribbean princess right here,
That is
like the
gonna get
one in Dune where the guy is using his narcotic music.
Do
And
you think we already discussed? I don't remember a goddamn thing about
no,
the movie.
that
Dune.
was in the book. In the book, there's this scene where
Oh, even less. Like, you think I read that? Do you
did.
see the outfit? Do I look like I read Dune? Excuse me. Take a look at me right now. If
I
you
look
saw
like
me
a
walking down
I am
the
a Caribbean
street,
princess.
you look me up
That
and
girl-
down and say, that girl,
That
she
girl-
is, I don't know a thing about her, but I bet she's
Tell
read
you one
the
thing.
book Dune.
She's read God Emperor of Dune.
Yeah.
I know that girl has.
That's everyone's first thought when they see me walking down the street.
All right, so there's Dune, the book.
Well, good.
Okay.
Explain it to me.
Then
Okay.
there's Children of Dune. No, there's then Dune Messiah. Dune Messiah is just 800 pages of faffing around.
Of what?
Faffing around. I don't like when an author faffs around.
It is kind of useless. Like, get to the point. The fuck did you just say?
Giant worm rules the universe, uses
Got it.
a police force of all women who are also priestesses of the worm, the God Emperor, to keep order in the universe.
Okay, I may not be a person that looks like I would read that, but I'm gonna read that now.
God Emperor of Dune is a beautiful book.
Are we gonna geek out and have a book club?
You should. You should read
YouTube
God
thingy.
Emperor of Dune.
We talked about doing
Yes.
reviews of TV shows or weird movies, the obscure ones, and
I
geeking
would
out over
love
those.
your
But I would do
take
a book.
on God Emperor of Dune.
Oh my god, I could finally put my weird ass notes I write to myself when I read shit that I'll never pick up again, but in
Yes.
the moment it feels like the most important thing in the world. Maybe I've been practicing for that my whole life.
Yeah.
That's what we should do, book
Yes.
reviews.
Then we will do our first
weird,
book review.
Weird book reviews.
Then there's Children of Dune. Also, you could read the first chapter and the last chapter and you've got Children of Dune.
Okay.
No point.
Got it.
Then his seminal work of absolute batshit crazy,
Ooh, I'm in.
God Emperor of Dune, which ties it all together, is the best book in the series
Mm-hmm.
and is batshit crazy. As evidenced by the main character is a 5,000-pound worm with a human face who rules the universe and used to be a man.
That sounds very wormy guy from Star Trek, Star Wars.
Oh,
Jabba
no,
the Hutt.
no, he's not Jabba the Hutt. He takes her symbol of bondage, wraps it around that big fat hobbit, Hutt guy,
The
and then
big
chokes him to
steroid
death.
worm.
Yeah, the big worm.
Okay, see, I could be into that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He's a giant sandworm with a human face and all of human memories for all of time, both male and female, of all his ancestors, which he uses to not see but predict the future with perfect accuracy so he can rule the world. But people who don't like being controlled leave his sphere of influence and evolve differently than the people who are evolving in stasis, and then come back with the ability to avoid people who can see the future. And it will be a girl who looks like this reads God Emperor of Dune.
And I'll teach you can't judge a book by its cover.
You can use your line you just used. Do I look like someone who read God Emperor of Dune?
No, but I did.
But I did.
I love underestimation. It is a fabulous thing.
but it's also like I instantly described it to you, and it's right up your alley.
Oh, I can't believe I haven't read it before.
It's one of those books. It's 4 books in the series, so you already had to put 2,400 pages into the Dune series before you pick up God Emperor of Dune. Which
I'm not going to do that.
No, but you don't have to.
Okay.
But I would think, like, who would pick up the 4th book in a series and go, oh, I'll read this?
Yeah, like, you have to be real in it.
If you heard, oh, there's 2,400 pages before this book, you'd be like, I can't. I'm not going to be able to. But you can follow it really easily. So I'll give you the short version. The first book's worth reading, but not as much as the last one, God Emperor. But you don't need to read Dune Messiah or Children of Dune. I feel like they're filler books, like 1,600 pages of filler.
Wow.
To get to the point.
I can't believe, but you've read this.
Yeah.
You've read 1,600 pages of filler.
Well, I listened to it because that was back in the days when I was trapped in an ambulance for 42 hours a week, and I loved it. It was so good.
Okay.
So, Frank Herbert, let's start with that. Right? You can't just
back it up.
You know, you need context.
Do not walk away from me. Do not. You are not. You're doing it, Nick.
So Frank Herbert he's a loon, which is nice.
I'm already sold.
He was like a 60s counterculture, did way too many psychedelics kind of person, and he was a journalist, and so he would go to all these weird places and write weird stories. And then somehow he ended up in California writing about sand dunes.
You know what? With the first part of your description, the leap actually makes perfect sense. Someone doing that lifestyle would eventually end up in California writing about something completely obscure. Yeah, my brain instantly. If you had said so lives in suburbia and drives a minivan, right, I'd say really unexpected. But that actually seems completely apropos.
I'm gonna go take peyote and lie in a sand dune and dream up this whole banana sandwich story, and it was really about the economics of commodities and political structures and religion, and it's very deep, and it's very much a very deep analysis of the religion, politics, and economics of the 1970s. And he frames it in a feudal structure, because even though we kind of live in a democracy, the way he saw it was large interests kind of really run everything, even when you are voting. And so the system that is feudalism. So you have a lot of competing, what he called houses. So there was House Harkonnen and House Carino and House Atreides.
The house of abundance.
Big aristocratic families that also ran companies.
Okay.
And they were part of a big parliament that voted on stuff. But how powerful your house was would decide how much sway you had over this Congress. And then there was an emperor over everything, and he had the military. So it's like he kind of has to play with everyone, and he kind of has, because if you want to keep the money flowing all around, all right, everyone in the parliament has to be happy, but you also don't want any of the houses to get too strong, because then they're going to want to be emperor.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the structure of the world in some ways. You have no one real force that can control everything, but you have religions that affect the people, and then you have companies that affect the people, and then you have militaries. And
yeah, it sounds very familiar.
So he was kind of trying to bring in ecology to that too, because he's out there in these sand dunes, and they're all going to get destroyed by industry and people moving into the area and all this other kind of stuff. And so he's just kind of playing with all these ideas in his head. So he comes up with this story, and he's like, it's got to be in the future to say what I want to say, because you can. Ursula Le Guin talked about this too. Like, you can.
Ursula Le Guin.
Ursula Le Guin.
What a good name!
I know, names on top of names.
Ursula Le Guin.
Ursula Le Guin.
Ooh.
You can talk about the present better in the future than if you reference it in the present.
Wait, say that again.
If you want to talk about the present, you set the story in the future. Because you can exaggerate everything.
Oh, yes. You can complete the symbolism you can draw upon.
Like, she wanted to talk about the changing versions of gender in the 1960s and 70s when she wrote Left Hand of Darkness. So she created a world where there's no gender 10,000 years in the future. It's like, I can only examine gender by taking it so far out. Now I can break it down and say, well, how silly would gender look like if you switch sexes every month or so?
That's an interesting way to do it, I see.
And so that was what, and so that's kind of what he does with it. He has to set it in the far future to talk about the present and human nature. And then the other interesting thing he did with Dune was, he's like, I don't want fucking robots, and I don't want computers, and I don't want lasers. Because that's all Buck Rogers shit.
Yeah.
He's like, everything in the future always has spaceships, lasers, robots, computers. So he sets the background of this thing called the Butlerian Jihad, where the thinking machines had kind of taken over the human race. And people got so pissed off about it because they were very oppressive that they overthrew the machines and then forbid anyone to use thinking machines or computers or anything like that. So it's the future, but you can't use any of that shit. You can only use people.
Wow, that's such a good way to do the future.
And when we're sitting here in our time and we think, oh, well, we have this level of technology, what's it going to be like in 10,000 years? If you have a religious concept that says, well, this is forbidden, now you kind of shut that off. Like, you don't think, oh, how come they don't have this thing I have now or a better version of it? The answer is there because it's illegal. Here's where he adds the wacky shit.
Okay. I need the wacky shit. Yeah. This is not wacky enough for me.
Alright, so here he starts going. So in all the universe, there's one planet where there's these giant worms and they fart out this stuff called the spice.
Do they really fart it out?
Oh, they poop it out. I don't know. It comes out of their skin.
So the factual is it comes out of their skin. It excretes from them.
Yes.
And your version of retelling an animal is excreting something probably from their pores.
Yes.
Or glandular. You translate that to he farts it out. That's your book review.
So, you got these giant worms that fart out magic dust.
I went, what? And you went, yeah. And I went, no. And I pressed a little bit more, and you eventually got to, well, so it didn't happen like that at all. But
I'm not taking notes. I'm just in my car talking. Here's what I always do when I tell a story. I don't believe in drama, and I don't believe in, like, pomp and circumstance.
Yeah.
So, the any way I can tell something, I'm going to tell it in the most down-to-earth way.
But it's not your story to tell. You're reviewing. You can't change it at will. This is somebody's body of work. Would you like it if you became a famous author and someone went, so I'm going to just retell it? Actually, that's exactly what I do.
You know, I would love that. I love when people take pretentious shit and boil it down to its essence.
And they get something from it, even if it's not what the intention was for me. It's art, and it is an art form, and art can touch people in completely different ways.
And Frank Herbert is a little pretentious. He goes into probably 200 pages of talking about the inner biological workings of these worms and their chemical processes and all this shit. I'm like, they fart out magic dust. Like, they're a giant worm that farts magic dust, okay?
I'm sure the 27 hours it took him to do the work of you saying he just farts out. I don't know if he'd be actually cool with that.
I don't care if he's cool with it, because I also, as much as I love his stuff, it's a little pretentious at times, and I want him to stop faffing about. And when he's faffing about the magical processes of an imaginary animal, you're faffing about. Just say they fart magic space dust.
Is that a real term? Is faffing out a real
Yes.
word? Is it really?
Yeah.
I love you so goddamn much.
Faffing means kind of like fooling around, like not getting to the point. I faff around a lot of my writing too. So like I need to be brutal on myself, being like, stop faffing about worms that's fart magic space dust.
Yeah, you can go down a rabbit hole.
I can go forever.
Yeah. He's the
Forever.
only person I know who edits his books and they get longer.
So much longer.
He's like, okay, I want you to read it, but
It's
not
painful.
the first draft. And I said, okay, I'll read your second draft. No, it's twice the book now. And not just a little, you double
Yeah.
at minimum.
Double. I faff.
You faff about,
I faff.
and then you stop it
Sorry, I
because you say,
I faff
oh,
too
wait,
much.
I'm going to go from writing a parenting book to a guy, this might be symbolism now that I'm thinking about it, to a hangman's autobiography. So maybe that's good that you didn't finish the parenting book, because you went, my next thought after writing about parenthood is to talk about a dude who hangs people. Oh my God, the symbol I'm so scared of. But that's kind of what parenthood is.
You know what's funny though? That's what happened when I went from meditating regularly and I was talking about Buddhism all the time.
Right.
To not.
Screamed at for...
To screamed at for my kids all the time. Now I'm talking about an executioner.
Wow. Yeah. But the executioner thing was so much more interesting.
It was so much more interesting.
What you wrote was amazing for the first one, but I like just to you talking about all the variations, because once again it got doubled.
It did.
And
it
then
really
you're like,
does.
so then I
It
talk
does.
about, I'm like, this is so good. It was so, the immense tornness of him was so beautifully done.
And that it blossomed out of parenting, because parenting is very much like the thing that really struck me about Franz's story was his father was an executioner. I mean, he's a real guy. His father was an executioner who was assigned to be an executioner by his lord. He didn't have a choice.
Right.
And because he was an executioner, his son was an executioner. Because it's a taint in the society. It taints the whole family line. You don't get to be anything else once you're that. And then he just wanted his kids to not be executioners, to not carry the family shame. And his way of doing that was by being, the title of the book is literally not mine, the one I read, is The Faithful Executioner. He believed that if he served well enough in his work, he could free his family. And he did. And it's so noble, but then you take a beat and you say, but his job was torturing people.
Yeah. Oh God, wow, that hits on such a different level now.
And then you take on the other level with, his job was torturing people, but also he was the medical expert for the whole city. He knew more about medicine and actually taking care of sick people than anyone else, because part of the torturer's job was to keep the tortured person alive.
So his job was to save lives and take lives.
Yeah, if you were sick or injured, especially traumatically, you went to the executioner because he knew more about anatomy than the doctor. Because he took people apart.
Wow.
And they would say, make sure when you're torturing this guy, you don't kill him so that you can kill him publicly later. What?
What?
Brutal beyond belief. And then you have this guy born into that. And
Forced to.
Forced to
He
do
would
it.
be.
Yes.
Not only would they kill him, they would kill his family if he said no.
And by doing it, he's ostracized and respected by the community.
Feared and depended on for medical care.
Yeah, and because he is doing this job, he's not allowed to go into public areas. He has to carry a staff. that identifies him as the executioner when he goes out in public so that no one accidentally touches him because he's unclean. But he's also the richest guy in town. Because he does jobs other people can't do, like body removal, digging latrines, and he gets well paid for that. Like his side hustles, he can collect taxes for prostitutes and other stuff that no one else can do, because if you did them, you're unclean. So he got more money than any working class guy at the time, but he also couldn't use it because he wasn't allowed to go anywhere or spend it on anything.
That's so bizarre.
And one of the ideas is that he bribed some official to allow the king to kind of sanctify his family and say, okay, you guys aren't executioners anymore. It was
so his son really didn't have to be
His son didn't have to be one.
And this really happened.
Yeah, because he was so dutiful in his work. And he was also kind of a pillar of the community. Most executioners were known for being like the worst drunks. And his take on it was, if I want to get my family out of this, I have to do my job dutifully and not drink, be sober, be known for being sober, be known for being God-fearing.
He was putting on a PR campaign.
He was. And he wrote his journal to document how faithful he was in the performance of his duties and how much his duties were of civil benefit to the world, so that he could give it to the king, who would then give his family clemency for being executioners.
Damn.
Isn't that the most unbelievable story? It was, because that's very much a Christian mythos of atonement through suffering. But for that to happen, you need a faithful executioner. You need someone who's not a sadist to torture the person, who's like cheering him on and wants him to die well.
Right.
And knows how to work the crowd to love the sinner, but also punish him. It's a level of bizarre complexity that no modern person can understand.
The mind fuckery.
Yeah.
A major theme of life is the mind fuck. This is one of the most remarkable things you'll discover in your life, is that life is a giant mind fuck.
I can't even wrap my head around that.
We can't. We're modern people. We can't understand
I think
any
I'm
of
fucked
that.
when my internet goes out.
Right.
I wouldn't be about that life.
And understanding life before 100 years ago, there were no choices.
Yeah.
That's the thing modern people just cannot understand about the past. You did not have choices in the past. You were given a life, and more or less you had to live it. You didn't get to choose what you are. You didn't get to choose who you marry. You didn't get to...
Yeah, you didn't get to choose who you marry.
You know...
That's... I know that was so longer of our history, but it's with our over 50% divorce rate.
Right.
And
you get divorced.
I understand that if you...
Right.
Yeah, but not having a choice, and it's no matter what. Is he doing XYZ? It just doesn't... It doesn't... There's death, and that's it. That's how you end a marriage. Bye. Thanks for playing.
I think it's hard for people to ever consider a life where you have no choices. And how do you have dignity and morality if you don't have choice? Like, we make all the wrong choices when we have every choice and every advantage. Like, how would you be moral in a world where you don't get to pick anything? Inspired by his devotion, because that's what parenting is. at the very core is devotion.
When you don't know the deeper meaning, you're like, hey, I was writing a parenting book and I
started writing about an
finish it.
executioner.
My kids then started going crazy halfway through and be like, yeah, this isn't the environment to write this. The vibes are off. I'll write about an executioner.
But the original point, I faff about.
Wow.
We're faffers.
Full circle.
Remember how we were talking? This was a quick review of Dune.
We're like this. Okay, we have a total idea what we're gonna do. We both agree on it, and we went in a completely different direction. We are faffers.
We are total faffers. That's why when I say, "Oh, where does the spice come from?" I say, "Giant worms fart out magic space dust." Because let's not pretend faffing is anything but faffing. Okay.
I read your vibes, and you need chicken soup today.
That's how you teach yoga. That's how you train people.
Vibes.
You just like, don't tell me what you need. You don't know what you need. Let me tell. Like, this is what I do.
This is what I do. Let me take over for an hour. I think sometimes you need to box.
Yep.
Sometimes you need shavasana. Sometimes you need to sweat. Sometimes you need to chill out.
Not letting you cheat is what nurses do.
I did
That's the
discharge
thing.
Instructions for too many goddamn years and had people ignore me then. I'm not like, oh, you want power yoga today? And your doctor literally said, you cannot go
Don't
up and down
bend.
for 48 hours. Last week was your person told you you
it.
couldn't sweat and you wanna do a PR for your deadlift? No. And half the time I'm like, girl, I can change it. Like, I'm a personal trainer. I can fucking do CrossFit to chair yoga and anything in between. I was a meditation instructor. Like, if you hurt yourself, we can work around it. But some shit just is like, that's a no dog. Like, having all type A personal clients, and like, you're so successful because of this, but this is counterintuitive. I'm working against you. Like, you need to bring it down.
That we need to be properly pushed, but also properly healed.
Yeah.
That's the body world, and that type A's do not do well in the body world.
No, and you know what we're going to do instead? We're going to explore why it makes you so uncomfortable to take 2 weeks off and do just a really low-key way to enter back into it. Like, your doctor's like, hey, don't lift for 2 weeks, and then just start slow and be
It's reasonable.
And you're like, no, I'm like, why do you need to lie to your trainer? And who has said the words myocardial infarction to me? And I said, you did not have your doctor clear you for a HIIT workout in 5 to 7. And this is the best part. He said business days.
Business days!
No doctor has ever used the No, Saturday and Sunday count in the medical world.
Yeah, you don't have
It's
not have
like
a body.
You sprain your ankle and it only swells Monday through Friday and takes inflammation off on weekends. And I went, no, that's a crock of shit.
You know what you get though? You get the elongated well. Well, the longer the well, the more the bullshit that's going to follow it.
People lying about your weight to a medical professional, like, we're calculating medical dosage. This isn't a judgment check. Like, please do not tell me you were 120 pounds when I have eyeballs.
You know what? I will give people credit. I will give them some charity, though, because so much in life are bullshit rules that you don't really need to follow.
People treat medical professional questionnaires like it's online dating. No.
I don't know if you ever knew this about me.
Weird place.
I faff about.
Yeah, what the fuck were we talking about?
We were talking about Dune.
That went out the window.
That was a long time ago. Because we tend
To faff.
I want to walk in with no pants.
No.
And I want to just like, give me a quesadilla.
What's with you and pantless?
The worms fart out magical space stuff.
That's as far as we made it. Okay, keep going.
But that's how he gets through to the next state of like, okay, how is this future? How do they travel through the stars and all this stuff? There's one planet in the world, in the universe, where these worms live, and these worms make this substance, which is hard to get and very rare. and it does one thing. It is a psychedelic. So anyone who takes the spice will either, in different variations, will have some sort of expansion of their consciousness. That's how it works.
Okay.
And it also extends your life. So they don't have computers, but they have people who drink this stuff, and they can do calculations like they're a computer.
So you actually could get a lot of shit done.
Yes, right. So you kind of need them on your side, but now they're also very smart. So how do you keep a person who's very smart loyal to you? So it's like all the complexities of working with a person, plus you can do future computer stuff.
Wow.
And then there's another group called the Navigators, and they can basically fold space and navigate through from one planet to another. But the only way they can do that is by being super high on the spice.
It feels very mysterious. The Scorpio in me is like, yeah.
Scorpio season, you're a fucking psycho. Yeah. Every one of my girlfriends has been a Scorpio, and boy, they fucked me up. What are you doing after this? No, I'm kidding. No, I can't.
I can do the first 3 books in 15 minutes.
Go.
All right, so the spice makes weird psychedelic things happen. So everyone uses it for their own ends, to do extra stuff. So like you can use it to make organic computer people. You can use it to make people who can bend time and space and not get lost. But those people, they have to do so much spice, they turn into like giant frog dudes, which look super creepy. They've got like a vagina on their mouth. They're very strange looking dudes. But they're technically still human beings. But they're so high on the spice all the time that they don't look human anymore. It's a stage 3 navigator. Thanks. Wait, what?
Wait, what?
Wait, what?
Wait, what now?
So, you got those guys that run a company that move everyone around. But they only can do it by getting high on the spice. So I think Frank Herbert liked his psychedelics.
I mean, someone who wrote that, not a stretch.
Yeah, he was like,
I
oh
don't
yeah,
want to typecast,
everyone can have superhuman powers as long as they're high enough.
but they say
Just
right what
saying.
you know.
Right what you know. And then the spice is an allegory for oil. You know, it's kind of like, it's in one area, it's a desert, there's a religious fanaticism around it, and it runs everything. Mm-hmm. So it was a good metaphor in that respect. And then he got away from you need machines in the future to do all the cool shit, because it's like, oh, if you get high enough on this spice, this magical worm fart, then you can do cool shit. Mm-hmm. All right, now we got to get into the eugenics part. So there's a bunch of warrior nuns.
Go.
And for 10,000 years, they've been breeding people.
Is that what the show is based off of?
The show?
The show literally called Warrior Nuns that we watched?
No.
With superpowers?
No, it's not. I don't know if they're called the Bene Jesuits.
Okay.
So Jesuits, as you remember, who taught your grandfather, are like the scholars of the Catholic Church, and Bene meaning good. So like, they're like, their whole order is they use the spice to be as mentally and physically perfect as a human can be. So these are all chicks who can do amazing things physically, but they also have chemical, emotional, and almost psychic control. Like they have this thing called the voice, where they can use a certain voice, and if you're weak-willed, you'll do whatever the voice tells you to, kind of like hypnotism.
Wow.
So they don't get magic-y, but they're like, oh yeah, these women can kind of hypnotize people. They're kind of ninjas.
All right.
And they infiltrate all the great houses, and all they care about is like finding people who they can breed to other people, because they're trying to breed this thing called the Quintzars Hathawak. which is the perfect human.
Wow.
And
I just like you saying it.
the Quintzar Haderach.
That just makes me feel happy.
He has all sorts of weird words that are awesome to say.
Awesome.
Like the Quintzar Haderach. And so their goal for the last 10,000 years is to be in the orbit of power, where all the power people are, and find the best genetic people and get them to fuck, or get them to fuck one of the Bene Jesuits, and then they can control, when they get pregnant, they can control whether they have a boy or a girl, because they're that level of internal control.
Wow.
So they can like decide which egg is going to get fertilized
Okay.
from magical psychedelics.
God, I didn't even track my period until I wanted to get pregnant.
And they can decide, yeah. And so their secret thing is, we are really eugenicists who are trying to make the perfect person, but we pretend to be a religious order. And one of the things they do is they go out into like rural planets where there are a bunch of superstitious people, and they make fake prophecies, and then 200 years later they come back and they're like, oh, one of our sisters planted a fake prophecy here. I can use these tricks to make these people think I'm a religious figure.
Wow.
So that was his commentary on religion, of kind of like, it takes innate human superstition and tries to manipulate it for the power, for the structures of power.
Holy shitball.
And then there's that kind of play on, they pretend to be a religious order, but their goal is to make the ultimate humanist, the ultimate example of a human being, which in fact would become a god on Earth. So they pretend to be spiritual, but really they're material. They want to create a living god by playing on people's superstitions of imaginary god.
Wow.
So there's a deep level there, and they're always dressed in all black, and they are very manipulative, and they're always kind of working their spy shit. They're assassins. They're a really interesting kind of faction in there, but they're not perfect, and they're all women. But the Quintzar Haderach is going to be a man.
Okay.
Because in their thingy-ding, they can look back in history to the memories of all the women who have come before them, but they can't see the minds of the men who've come before them.
Wow.
So to be able to see the future, you need to be able to perfectly see the past. And only the Quintzar Haderach can look back and see the history of all women in his line and all men. And with that, and the mentat, psychic, space calculations,
obviously,
he becomes the perfect person, not because he can see the future, but because he can calculate the future.
Okay.
Because he understands the past perfectly, and he understands the present perfectly, he can guess what the future is perfectly. Or guess what all his... how his things will be played out 100, 200, 300 years in the future. So that's their whole deal. And so into all this mess, there's this boy, his name's Paul Atreides, and he might be this perfect being.
Okay.
Now their plan was, his mom was supposed to have a girl, the Harkonnens was supposed to have a boy, and they thought the next generation will be this perfect person. So they were getting ready for it. But then the woman fell in love with his father, and he really wanted a son, so she gave him a son. And they are pissed, because they're like, 10 fucking thousand years, bitch! We've been waiting 10 fucking thousand years! We were ready to pair these two together, and then from birth, we'd be ready with it. We had it all planned out, and you fucked it up. So they're pissed. But they're like, all right, like, he might be it. But they're not sure.
Okay.
So he goes to the planet where the worms are and all the spice, and all sorts of weird shit starts to happen to him.
Okay.
Because he's starting to get psychic being around all this space dust. Because the planet is covered in the space dust.
Okay.
And then there's a group of religious people who live out in the desert. It's called the Fremen. And they have always been oppressed by whatever house is running the planet, because they're like, look, we're here to steal all your shit and get your resources. And they're like, no, the desert is sacred. You can't have our stuff.
Yeah.
So they're always like a terrorist force, which again, more allegory. And so they're out in the desert, and they have this prophecy that someone's going to come from Outworld and be their prophet. Mm-hmm. They don't know that the prophecy was put there by the Bene Gesserit a few hundred years ago. They think it's a religious thing.
Okay.
And so he comes, and then his mom is like, look, here's your prophet. Because their house falls, their enemies kill them all, they run out in the desert, and they're in the middle of the desert with all these religious nut jobs, and she's like, oh, I know what you're all believing, because we put it there.
Wow.
And look, here's my son, he could be your prophet. And he could use you guys to get revenge on the people who killed his father.
Wow.
So that's the way they go at it. And then the kind of final little wrinkle with Dune that is really cool that he does is he follows the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell wrote this book called The Hero's Journey, which is kind of like the archetypal, this is the story of a traditional Western hero. Mm-hmm. And he's following it with this Paul Atreides guy, like he's the savior. But then in the next two books, it turns out he turns into like more of Hitler than the savior. So he makes this statement of like, the person that follows that heroic archetype that you think is the hero, he always turns out to actually be a dictator and a tyrant. So he takes the hero of book 1 and makes him the villain of book 2 and 3. So all the people who are even into Dune, they're like, yay, the hero wins at the end.
Oh my God.
He avenges his father. He takes over from the evil world, and everything is right. The hero wins in the end. And then the next book is like, oh yeah, all those people that were worshiping him like a god, they went out into the universe on a big holy war and killed billions of people. Oops. But also predictable. Like, they knew this was going to happen. And then when you're like, oh, you just subverted it, you made the hero into the villain, they subvert it again because he sees the future, and he's like, even though all those people died, if that didn't happen, if this thing called the Golden Path didn't happen, all of the human race would have died. So you're like, double Uno reverse card. He's the hero. No, he's Hitler. No, he killed 7 billion people to save all of humanity. And that's the sound you make. Is that good? I
can't say it's good, but
right. And then there's this piece in it where it's like, well, if he really does perfectly know the future, and he says the human race would die if he didn't kill all these people, then it's true.
Will you put up the back window?
But then again, is it just a hallucination that he knows the future? And there's no magic, so you don't know. So it just kind of sits there in you. But then when he realizes this and he sees this jihad goes across and kills all these people, and he sees what he has to do to follow this golden path, he freaks out and he says, fuck it, I'm just leaving. And he quits and he wanders off into the desert. So he kills he is the hero and avenges his father and takes over the evil empire. Then he's the villain who leads a religious war that kills a bunch of people to save humanity, but then he can't go forward to the final step to become a giant worm himself. He doesn't want to give up his humanity, and he can't live with all the people he killed, so he just flips out and wanders off into the desert. Almost like it's for nothing. Yes, and then you just sit there and go, huh? Because you can't figure out if it's good or bad. You can't clearly see what the right thing to do would be.
Right.
And then in the next book, his son decides that he was a coward for not finishing what he started, and he decides to finish it. And what he started was this thing called the Golden Path. And what he ultimately saw when he looked into the future was a bunch of people like him were going to be born. Like, he was the first, but people who could see the future were coming. And the only way to stop that from happening, and if that happened, then because you'd have all these superhumans who could see the future, they would all start fighting, and in the end, it would end up killing everyone. And the only way to stop people from like him from being born, for at least for now, was to make everything like super static for 5,000 years, and then send all the interesting people far out because they don't want to live in a static world. So the Golden Path was to create an institution that was religious, political, and economic, that would make everything so kind of flat that no one would evolve for 5,000 years. And then people who couldn't stand that because they're restless people,
right,
who were the ones who are most likely to evolve, would leave the empire, go out into the far out reaches of the universe where no one knows where they are, and then come back once they've evolved to be able to go outside of the vision of people who could see the future. Yeah. So he sets up this moral question, which is so unknown and complicated that you can't really decide what the moral choice is. And then he sets up this idea of sometimes you need things to stay the same for what he would call for humanity to mature enough to be able to deal with the next step. Because in their current form, they're too immature. And then is like the only way for these people, these one type of people to evolve is if you evolve a group of people who are outside of their power to fight them. So you need conflict for things to not become tyrannical. So he's playing with a lot of crazy shit there. And that's where God Emperor of Dune, the best book, starts.
That's where it starts.
That's where it
Page
starts.
1, this is already
Page
happened.
1 is 3,000 years into the rule of this worm god.
I'm in. Let's book review the shit out of it.
Happy birthday, man.
Thank you. Oh, snacks.